In one part of his book, Dolbach compares all of us to a certain swimmer who is putting forth a lot of effort to swim downstream. And they think that their arms and their legs are making a big difference, but in fact, it's the current that's carrying them. So this guy here, he looks like he's coming toward us. Maybe he's doing the breaststroke, and he thinks that, it's up to him, that he's in control of where he goes. But even if he were to stop his motions entirely, still the current would carry him right toward us anyway. Now again, this has all been so far an exposition of D'Holbach's hard determinism. Um, he's defending it against objections, but hasn't exactly given us an argument for its truth. How might you argue for hard determinism? Well, here's one way. This is not D'Holbach's argument, this is mine. But I think that D'Holbach would accept this as a sound argument. So premise one says determinism is true. It is true that every event has a cause. Now add to that another premise. If determinism is true, no one is able to do otherwise than they in fact do. If every event has a cause, then for anything that you choose or anything you do, that choice or that action was caused. And causing means forcing to happen. So it looks like if on a particular occasion you raised your hand in class, or if you chose to drink Coke rather than Pepsi, or if you said yes to someone asking you out on a date, in each of those cases you weren't able to do otherwise than you in fact did, because every event has a cause. So from 1 and 2 we can infer that no one is ever able to do otherwise than they in fact do. So that's not a separate premise, that's a preliminary conclusion. It follows from 1 and 2. Add one more premise in there, step 4 in the argument. Humans are free only if they are sometimes able to do otherwise than they in fact do. You might think that's true by definition. That seems plausible. Freedom requires being able to do otherwise, and so the final conclusion is that no human is free. And that logically follows from 3 and 4. So what do we think about this argument? It seems to be valid, doesn't it? That if each premise were true, then the conclusion would be true. And what about there's only 3 independent premises here, and if we accept all 3 of them and the argument's valid, then it looks like we have to accept the conclusion as well. Is it obvious that determinism is true? No, it's not obvious. Some think it's true and some think it's false. But this might seem obvious, and this might seem obvious. So maybe what really matters is this. But you have to decide what you think about this argument. Do you think this is a sound argument or not? If you are a hard determinist, then you'll say that this argument is sound. If you're a libertarian, then what will your response to this argument have to be? You're going to have to say that it's unsound, right? But why is it unsound? Not because it's invalid. You're going to deny this if you're a libertarian, right? You're going to say, no, I don't think determinism is true. What if you're a compatibilist? If you're a compatibilist, then you're going to say the argument is unsound as well. The compatibilist believes in human freedom, but thinks that human freedom is compatible with determinism. So the compatibilist is going to deny premise 2. And also the soft determinist is going to deny premise 2 as well. Now who's correct? Well, it can't be all of them. The argument's either sound or not. If the argument's not sound, it's because of premise 1 or premise 2, or possibly premise 4. We haven't talked about how you might challenge that. Now, my main response to this argument is to wonder why I should grant that first premise. Notice that determinism is a very extreme claim. It's not that, generally speaking, every event has a cause. It's not that most events have causes. It's that every event has a cause. Every event where? Right here? In this room? In my body? On the earth? No, every event in all of time and space. Determinism says that every event in all of time and space is forced to happen by some one or more other events. And my question is, how could you know something like that? So I call this argument Dale's dilemma for determinism. Premise 1, if we know that determinism is true, we know this by reason alone or by experience. So think about something like 1 plus 1 is 2, or every triangle has 3 sides. Arguably, we can know these things are true by reason alone. Just when you understand what 1 plus 1 equals 2 means, you'll see, as it were, with your mind's eye that it's true. When you understand what a triangle is, you'll realize that every triangle has 3 sides. There couldn't be a triangle that didn't have 3 sides. On the other hand, some things we know by experience, that Fredonia is colder than Miami, or that New York has more people in it than Dallas, Texas. Or we know by experience that if you drink too much over a long period of time, that will give you brain damage. So a lot of what we know is by experience, by what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we discover through science. Other things we know just by thinking about it, just through reason alone. So if determinism is true, and we know that it's true, we're going to know it in one of those two ways. Second premise, we don't know that determinism is true by reason alone. Step 3, we don't know that determinism is true by experience. Right? How many events have there ever been in the history of the universe, past, present, and future? Suppose I represent that set like this. And how many of these events have human beings experienced? Just a tiny proportion of them, right? So if we've only experienced this many events, how can we infer that every event that's ever been has a cause? It looks like a hasty generalization. Look, if I go to New York City once and I only meet one person, and that person's nice, and I infer from that all New Yorkers are nice. You say, well, how do you know that, Dale? Well, I know that all New Yorkers are nice because I went to New York one time and I met somebody, and that guy was nice, so I infer from that all New Yorkers are nice. You would think I was an idiot, and I would be an idiot for making that inference. What if I go to New York and meet 10 people, and it just so happens one of them is nice? Can I infer from that all New Yorkers are nice? No. Because there's millions and millions of New Yorkers, and that's not a big enough sample. Maybe it's not a random sample. Maybe everybody I met was at some particular meeting full of nice people. Okay, so how could we know that determinism is true by experience, that every event in space and time is caused by other events to occur? Okay, well then, in my view, we don't know that determinism is true. So we don't know that hard determinism is true because we don't know that determinism is true. Now here are a few points about my argument. In conclusion, premise 1, I would say a determinist should agree with that, the one that says that if determinism is true, we know it by reason alone or by experience. How else are we going to know that determinism is true? I assume that the determinists will agree with me, and that anybody will agree with me about that. Premise 2, we don't know that determinism is true by reason alone. That's because it's not a necessary truth. It's not the kind of thing that you can tell is true just by thinking about it. A necessary truth in logic and philosophy is something that's true and couldn't possibly be false, that it's contradictory to suppose it false. So if some claim is such that it's contradictory to suppose it false, then it has to be true. It has to be true no matter what. So go back to my example that every triangle has three sides. What would it take for that to be false? Well, there'd have to be something which is a triangle that didn't have three sides. That's contradictory. If there's a triangle that doesn't have three sides, it's a triangle and it's not a triangle. Right, so it's contradictory. It's nonsense to suppose my claim false, which is just to say it couldn't possibly be false that all triangles have three sides. It has to be true. Now, can we coherently suppose that determinism is false? So determinism says that every event has a cause. What would it take for that to be false? There would have to be some event which wasn't caused, some event which was not forced to happen by other events. So maybe it's just a random occurrence. Now, can we suppose that in all of space and time there has been one chancy event or one random occurrence? I don't see why not. It's not contradictory. Okay, so it's not something the opposite of which is obviously impossible. It's not something which has to be true. That is to say, it's not a necessary truth. So it looks like my premise 2 here is correct. We don't know that determinism is true by reason alone. 3, how could we? How could we know that it's true by experience? I already gave that argument. Okay, so this argument doesn't show that determinism is false. If this argument here is sound, it shows that we don't know that it's true, that maybe no one knows that determinism is true. We could also add that a lot of physicists today don't think that determinism is true. Most physicists today, not all, but most of them, believe that there are events at the micro level, events below the level of our perception involving small particles. Most physicists think there are events involving those which are not caused. They're not forced to happen. They think that there's genuine randomness there at the subatomic level. If those physicists are right, and I don't know whether they are, but if those physicists are right, then also determinism is false, and it's not something we know to be true. Okay, so if I'm right, if we don't know that determinism is true, then we don't know there's no free will. And we don't know that this argument for determinism that I gave a minute ago is sound. So if I'm right, we don't know that this is sound because we don't know that premise 1 is true. So that's interesting. Do you accept my argument? Do you think that my 4-step argument here with one conclusion, do you think that that's a sound argument? Or would you deny one of the premises? What do you think? Right, this is the joy of philosophy, that it helps you think through some of the most important issues that there are. These are pretty much all the options that there are when it comes to free will. And really smart philosophers have thought through these, and you're going to pick one or the other. And I think it's important that you pick one or the other. And eventually I'm going to argue that we do have free will, and we have a kind of free will which is incompatible with determinism. But we'll come to that in due course.